Welcome to another episode of the Investmentor Podcast. Today we have a very special guest joining us, who is Amanda Rassmussen from AJR Property Management.
Correct. Welcome.
Thank you. Also we're joined by Priscilla, who's one of our co-founders, and this is actually the first time we're doing a podcast together.
That's right.
Did you realize that?
Yeah,
Wow.
funny.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
It's only taken me 2 years, so
Okay.
I must be getting somewhere to do a podcast with Priscilla.
Yeah, I've been refusing.
Yeah, so very excited.
Yeah, this is lovely.
So, Amanda, maybe we'll kick things off by just if we can get you to do a quick intro,
Sure.
if that's all right.
Yes, my name is Amanda. I am the owner of AJR Property Management, and I have been out in business now for myself going on just over 3 years. So before that, obviously my background is real estate. I did a traineeship when I was 18. I'm now 42. So been in the industry for that time.
A lot of experience.
A lot, yeah. So starting as receptionist and then making my way through, obviously property officer, property manager, senior property manager, done a bit of assisting in sales, and
Wow.
then now going out for business for myself.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Yes.
When did you realize this is an industry that you wanted to stay in long term?
When I was, I think after leaving high school, not knowing, so obviously finishing year 12, not knowing necessarily what I was going to do because it's a very adult decision, I found that Dad had always had a bit of a interest and did a little bit of developments on the side of his business. So, he did that as another sort of part of his business. And so I was always quite interested in real estate. So that was pretty much early from about 18. So
Wow.
Dad took me down to the local agent from where we were living, and it was a friend of his, and said, can you give her a traineeship? And that's how it all started.
Wow.
So when I was 18.
18.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because
thank you.
I was very similar. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yes.
And because I grew up in a family of accountants, with one sitting next to me, that's how I got started.
We actually related.
Yes.
Fortunately
I
or
only found that out today.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
I only found this out today. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's another fun fact for you.
Yes.
But yeah, look, when I was 18, I had no idea. And because I came from a family of accountants, that's how I chose the uni subject.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I had no idea
Yes.
what I wanted to do. And it took me, since I started working as a 20-year-old as an accountant, it took me 8 years to realize it wasn't for me.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's how I got started in property.
That's great.
But funny thing is my two adult children are also at uni and also doing accounting.
Yes. Wow.
So we'll see how,
Yes, how that'll
how
go.
many
Let's see
years
how
take them
long-
to realize.
Yes, of
That,
course.
it's not going to be for them. But anyway.
That's right.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my obviously Dad being an engineer and having his own engineering consulting firm, and then obviously doing property development on the side, that was part of why I got into it. My twin sister, I'm an identical twin, and she's been in the building industry. So, and then my older sister's been conveyancing. So there's obviously property in our family.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, because you're here, we obviously got to talk a lot about, your expertise,
Sure.
what you're seeing in the market, what are the key things that a tenant should know,
Yes.
a landlord should know, the most, maybe for a bit of fun, the most interesting scenario that you've come across.
Okay. We've got lots of
So
those.
I think this episode will be, full of knowledge and fun.
Okay.
And maybe something for Priscilla to kick us off as well.
Sure.
You would have dealt with a lot of property managers
Absolutely.
in your lifetime,
Yeah.
because you've been an investor for how long now?
Oh, more than 25 years.
25
yeah.
years.
Yeah.
So what are typically, the qualities that you look for in a property manager?
Yeah. So maybe I can answer that question by kind of telling a little bit about how I actually met Amanda.
Yeah,
And then obviously
please.
introducing her to Investmentor business. So it's very interesting. I was actually looking for a property manager in the northwest area of Sydney for one of my own property in Marsden Park.
Yes.
So I actually look at, Google it And then I actually have about 3 or 4 names lined up. And I said, look, I'm going to do my own due diligence and research and see which one I actually like before I hand over my property.
Yes.
So the first one that I rang, it was actually the business that Amanda was working with at the time. So Amanda actually picked up the phone. I was actually put through to Amanda. So we start chatting. And then to cut the long story short, after a conversation, maybe 15 to 20 minutes,
correct,
I didn't really ring the other 3.
Yeah.
Essentially, I hand over the property to Amanda.
Yes.
And even though during that time, Amanda actually left that business, starting her own.
Yes.
So as a result, we didn't receive the same level of service. So we actually then changed. We actually changed property manager.
Yes.
And Amanda was actually really professional also. She didn't really contact me.
Yes.
Right? And so I had to kind of change because I didn't really receive the same level of service when you were there.
Yes.
But funny enough, that property now, we already settled for, how many years? About 4 years, almost 5 years.
About 5, yeah.
The tenant that Amanda found for us, still there.
Yeah.
Same tenant.
Lovely family.
And even during COVID, a lot of people have come to us and asking to cut rents or, look after us because they go through some hardship. And that every same tenants, continue to pay us really good rent.
Yeah, that's lovely.
So we're really, really grateful. So that really shows you, I'm a very seasoned investor myself.
Yes.
And so therefore, when I talk to people, I kind of can smell
Yes.
that you have experience, you know what you're doing or
Yes.
not. So I look for people that are honest,
Yes.
tell you the truth rather than tell you what you need to know to
Yes.
win your business.
Correct.
And Amanda's certainly very down to earth and very, upfront and honest.
Yeah.
But you also can tell Amanda very passionate about what she does.
Yes.
And she also have the local expertise in that area. And she tell me, the demographic, what you should be looking for. And she even tell me at that time, Marsden Park was not half as desirable as now, but she's already said, oh, this is going to be a booming area.
Yes.
And that all come from her experiences, is local expertise. And she also live around the area as well.
Yes.
So I felt at the time, I was absolutely in good hands.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, I appreciate that because even if I did work for somebody else, I've always taken a lot of pride in how I do things because again it's reputation, and also too I'm very passionate about finding the right tenant because it's a no-brainer. So you have a great landlord, great property, it's only natural to get a great tenant. So the due diligence on my end is to ensure that everybody's actually all the references are checked out. Unfortunately, for a lot of agencies, they do tend to actually take on green property managers, and that's for their own reasons, whether it's finances and so forth. But I think it comes down to experience and knowledge of the local area, but also to making sure that the client is happy in all aspects. But it just comes easy for me because I do pride myself on how I do find tenants for my landlords.
Yeah.
So having a good rapport with the landlord, knowing the property, and then having a good rapport with the tenant is also very important, in my opinion, because it's got to work. So having a great tenant that's going to pay rent on time and look after it is it just works.
Yeah.
So,
So during that time, I also introduced, I was already in the property game. So I actually refer a few of my clients to Amanda. And I remember, one of the client, Amanda, I actually accompanied that client to walk through his property.
Yes.
And then I could tell, your relationship with that tenant was amazing. They were so accommodating, and with a very short notice, they will let us walk through the properties as well.
Yes.
But when it comes to when you need to be tough, when the tenant may not have done the right thing, Amanda also very firm on what she needed to do to get the things sorted for the tenant.
Definitely.
As well. And which is, to me, is very important as a landlord.
It is. I think it's, again, building that relationship with the tenant, having a rapport, but there are boundaries. So obviously I'm still here to do a job, but making sure that the actual tenant does the right thing for my landlord. So it just becomes seamless for me, and it just means that it all just works to the point where when the tenant moves out, there's very little to do. So it's all able to be re-rented quite quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point. So because you have to deal with both the landlord as well as the tenant.
Yes.
So how do you balance the interests for both parties to in the best way possible?
First and foremost, my client is my landlord. So I actually ask a lot of questions, but I also give them an idea of what sort of demographic, what sort of tenant they may achieve. And then it's obviously opening it up to, there's more tenants now that have pets. So you might have to be a little bit more open-minded. In some areas, it's more pet related, I guess, than other areas. But I think it's just giving the owners the idea that they can trust me and my process, that I do all my due diligence first. So to be honest, I don't have a difficult landlord. I actually get along with all my landlords. I know them as a person. I know their little bit of background. I have a great rapport with all my landlords, and I have a great rapport with all my tenants. So it just works. I don't have a problem rent roll at all.
Okay. Wow.
I don't have.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I think that just goes to show just knowledge, experience, and the fact that I love what I do. I think that purely comes down to that. I take a lot of pride in what I do. Hence why going out and doing more of a niche market of just property management more than sales. Sales is where the money is. I'm not about I'm not about the money personally. My passion's property management.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, you're licensed to do sales as well, Amanda?
Yes, I'm a Class 1 licensed. Yes,
okay,
so
here we go.
I'll only take on if I do have an owner, because there's a lot of owners that don't want to outsource another agent. So they will ask me to sell the property.
Yeah.
I'll probably only take on about 2 or 3 sales a year, and that's only because that's only if I have the chance or the opportunity. So to be honest, it's one of those things it's not saying that I don't enjoy it. It's just my primary focus is property management.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll keep you in mind.
Sure. That's great. Yes.
So relate to your expertise. So what I think obviously of your personal qualities makes a big difference. But what other key qualities that makes AJR stand out from the rest, in your opinion?
I think the reason that's why we stand out is getting to know each individual. I think it's always important when you actually open up a door to, say, a tenant looking at a property. I find that I ask a lot of questions. So get to know the actual tenant, make them feel comfortable, because there are a lot of property managers that do tend to open up the door and just let them walk around. You don't get to know who people are, and that's why I think I've always had gut feelings, and I do ask a lot of questions. So I really haven't gotten it wrong, knock a wood. So with regards to finding the wrong tenant, because I have a good instinct on people and how they present themselves, how they come to me for questions, and they're not telling me what I want to hear. They're actually genuine about the property. So once I actually have a good feeling, I'll ring, like Priscilla, I say, I have a great feeling about this tenant. I'm hoping that the paperwork will come through, and when it does, it just speaks for itself. So, and then obviously doing the checks and tickers and all that sort of thing as well. So there's a lot. I think it's getting the job done right from the very beginning is very important, especially for investors. These are not just cars. These are homes. These are $1 million properties. So the actual investment is very important, and I think it's just as important to have a good tenant as it is a good property manager to make sure that the actual tenant does the right thing so that the investors are happy. To be honest, again, knock on wood, but in 3 years, I don't lose managements.
Wow.
I haven't lost a single management. So, and my managements are only just growing. And again, that's all by word of mouth.
I see.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's probably for that same reason when we are ready to, I guess, look for property management partnership.
Yes.
You were the actually first one I call upon.
Yes, lovely. Thank you, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. I didn't think about anything else but Amanda.
No, that's so lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Because when I did actually leave my last place of employment, again, I didn't want to build a rent roll based on. I wanted a rent roll that I actually grew, because if people wanted to, I have an unusual surname, so people will find me if they wanted to.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's one of those things, if they want me to manage their property, they will find me. So I didn't ever want to feel, going out into business for myself, that it was going to be built on, a rent roll where I've poached anybody.
Yeah.
It's never been that way, and hence why I didn't tell Priscilla, like I didn't tell any
Yeah,
owner.
I lost you. I lost contact with you for a bit, and I found you
Yes,
actually.
and we spoke, and so it was one of those things I made a big point of saying that it's not my place because I don't own that rent roll. That's actually owned by somebody else. So it'd be very unethical for me to go poaching people for business just to advance myself when I know that I can do it just on word of mouth and people finding me.
And just continuing that business topic, where do you see AJR going in the short, medium, long term? What's your vision with AJR?
I would love I don't think it's going to stop here. So I actually run a nice little rent roll now. So I've got Beck on board, she's fabulous and has been with me now for 7 months. And my dad's now come on board. Obviously, I'd like to keep that as a family business. So for he being a great mentor growing up, obviously being heavy in development and things like that. So he's got a passion for it as well. And obviously a big support. There will be a fourth person coming on soon because the rent roll is growing. So, to be honest, commercial in an area that will be central to all my Sydney properties, I think that's important. But also, I would still love it. I've got Synology and everything set up where everybody can work from home, treating it like mobile. But again, we all, have our own roles to play. Yeah. So I would ideally have a team. I'm a bit of a control freak, so I still like to be in the business as well as. I'd like to be working on in the business as well as working on it. Yeah. So it's important that I work on it just as good as I work in it.
Yeah, okay. I think for us, we really like the fact that you're the business owner, but you're still working in the business, so you know what's happening, and you take full control. And we can all feel your passion. Yes. And I actually like to share. One of my personal experiences is actually, probably about 2 years ago, I do have a relatively large property portfolio. Yes. And also diversify into, other cities within Australia. Yes. So as a result, my husband typically manage all my property management. And you dealt with Alan, right? Yes. And but he was complaining, wow, my goodness, I need to deal with multiple property managers because the property portfolio that we have. Yes. So about probably 2 or 3 years ago, we decided to consolidate, and we actually gave a lot of business to one of the like a national startup company, which I'm not going to name. Unfortunately, they actually went under recently. All right. And so that was at the back of a decision that we felt, okay, that company was charging a lot cheaper rate, and it's national, so we only need to deal with one property manager. Yes. But in hindsight, that was actually a wrong decision because I think when it comes to property management, the local knowledge, being there, building the rapport and relationship with landlords and tenants, also keeping an eye on things, is so damn important. Yes, it is. And we learned the hard way that in hindsight, we actually realized that given that we really only deal with someone that is almost very remote, and a lot of our rental are not up to date. Yes. And our rental actually fell very much behind. Yes. And as a result, we probably suffer a lot of financial losses as well. Not really saving money, but actually costing us a lot more. Yes. So I really highly encourage people not necessarily look for the cheapest option when it comes to property management, but look for someone that passionate, will really look after your property. Definitely. And know who to look for as your tenant as well. And take good care of it on a day-to-day basis.
And I think you're right in saying that it has to be someone more local or know the actual area because, again, they understand the rent increases in place. They understand keeping an eye on the actual tenant, going out as regular to do inspections. That's also very important. There was, I don't want to name names, but there was an agent that I had spoken to probably about near 2 years ago, and this was during COVID. And we were all getting together, property managers, trying to brainstorm how we can do inspections while we can't actually leave our LGAs. Yeah. So it's kind of one of those things. This was difficult. There was a program that Property Me and other other programs had created, which the tenant can do their own inspection. And I thought to myself, that would be the worst idea. I had to do it, unfortunately, for some. But again, because I trust my tenants and I know my tenants, I know that they're not going to do a shortcut. Yeah. But when this agent said that he's only ever done that, and I said to him, but how do you know? They're going to take photos of what you want to see. Yeah. They're not going to show you that they've got a burn mark to the carpet or a hole in the wall. You won't know this until you do the final inspection. That's right. So you're creating more work for yourself than actually good. Yeah. But for the sake of a 15, 20 minute, and it keeps things going like connection with the tenants, bring the landlords along so they can actually see how good the actual tenants are keeping the property. It's a no-brainer. So, and it's very much, it's common sense stuff. This job is common sense, but you've got to have the right person in place to actually make sure that they do what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So my property is a minimum 2 to 4 inspections a year.
Great.
I also find too that the longer term the tenant, I generally do it on a 6-monthly cycle because it just doesn't make you feel like you're completely invading them every 3 months when we know that they're perfect. So it sort of makes them feel like that's their home. That's their sanctuary. We'll come in and do our inspections 6 monthly.
Yeah.
But if I need to keep an eye on a tenant because they're not maintaining the lawns, or if it's a little bit untidy and we just need to keep an eye on it, then it's 3 monthly.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Remember,
sense.
Tony, when you were rent vesting, we never actually seen an agent walk through your property for like 3 years.
Oh, right. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes.
So we can relate to 100% what you were talking about.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And just to wrap up on the business side, so in Sydney, do you service all areas or specifically pockets of Sydney?
I'm all areas of Sydney. I do try to keep it more close in. So but again, now that the actual teams are expanding, gives me all more opportunity to open up to different areas. So because of my reputation and where I've been before now, it's very local.
Northwest.
Yes, that's correct. So I'm more around those areas, but I do have them in Penrith because a lot of the actual owners, investors actually have more than 1 or 2 properties. And so I've got an owner who has 6 or 7, so I actually manage all of his, and they're all in around the northwest. But then I have a couple in Oran Park for him. So it's kind of one of those things. It's
now expand to southwest, and we force you to anyway.
Which is great. Which is great because again, too, it's a great opportunity, especially for the product that property is. The quality gives you a quality tenant. It's I hate using the word. It's a no-brainer. So if the property is great and it's in a great location and there's a lot of close to shops, schools. I know the botanical gardens are just down the road.
Yes,
it's close to the M7, the M5. The M7, the M2. So it's location. I've got all my tenants predominantly are working in and around Campbelltown. Have businesses. One's a high school teacher, local high school teacher with a family. We've got a bit of a variety, but quality tenants.
So Amanda is referring to one of our recommended property to our members in Mount Annan.
Yes.
And we actually call that project a unicorn.
Yes.
Because from a location, capital growth, and also rental return, also quality point of view, it's just so unique.
Yes, it is. I think also too, it's again easy in terms of strategizing, as marketing is really important. So the point of difference that I made from everybody else that actually does camera phone photos, I do professional photos, but I also do it. I actually had my photographer go through one of the properties to do more of the feature of the taps, because they're unique. The oven, all different sort of things, which actually draws people's attention. Which actually creates a lot more inquiry and things like that. So each property that I've had, I think I've leased it first weekend.
Yes.
And I do get quite a few people, vast of all different cultures. But each one that I've had, I've been very comfortable with. And again, I've been in control of that. So it's one of those things. Again, control freak. I need to be in control of that.
I think for all our Montaigne members, they're in very good hands. With Amanda.
And they couldn't be happier.
Oh, good. That's great news.
And then for any future members, because not everyone has settled yet.
More to come.
We'll definitely introduce you guys to Amanda.
Yes.
As an option, but it's definitely highly recommended.
That's lovely. Thank you.
Right.
I appreciate it.
Now we're going to shift a bit of gear, so into more technical.
Sure.
Just more for education for our members.
Yes.
So I'm going to hit you with some very, very tough questions.
Okay, great.
Hope you're prepared.
Okay, I'm all ready. Yes.
Awesome. So, and just to kick off, when you're educating landlords.
Yes.
And I've dealt with this recently, where I've had a member who has an investment property, and regularly, for some reason, there's always requests sent to my member saying, hey, can you fix this? Can you fix that, from the property manager? So, and then him being a first-time investor, he wasn't sure what to say no to, or does he have to say yes to everything?
Okay.
From a repair and maintenance point of view. So, Amanda, from your point of view as a landlord, what are the specific requests that you must say yes to from a tenant, and what are the ones that you can say no to?
Yes. Okay, so this pretty straightforward. Everything has to be working in a property. So the actual tenant is taking on a property that everything has to be working. Oven, air conditioning. As simple as if they leave a gas heater in a property, my recommendation would be to not leave those sort of items if it can be removed, because the likelihood of the tenant actually requesting that they be fixed should it break down is going to be the landlord's responsibility. So,
as in, wait for the tenant to install themselves if they want.
If they choose to, So that's why there's gas outlets and things like that, so they can bring their own.
I see.
Okay.
Yes.
So I went to do a rental appraisal over at Grantham Farm yesterday, and the same applied. He had a swing set out the backyard.
For the kids.
For the kids.
Yeah.
He wants to leave it there, and he wants to leave a barbecue and the dining table, and I said no to all three.
Right.
Because it's one of those things, you'd rather a blank canvas, because a lot of the occupants, the tenants anyway, have all their house full of furniture. They need to shift it from one place to another. So there's very rarely in those sort of areas would you have somebody that's starting new. So without anything. And again, if you're going to have, I would always say no to, depending on, again on the area, fully furnished or partly furnished, unless it's more inner city, where there's probably, again, depending on the demographics, if it's near unis and things like that, that's when you would actually be encouraging something like that should the owners want to put furniture in. So to answer your question with regards to what the owner's responsibilities are, anything that the tenant took on has to be working. So what's reasonable is essential services such as hot water, air conditioning is deemed urgent, oven and gas. Urgent repairs such as major leaks, electrical faults. If it's as simple as a light bulb, this is where it's grey. So what I've learnt through my history of property management, and more so recently, is that the tenants want the light bulbs replaced because it's an LED light, but it's not just about the light, it's the transformer. So the whole thing's, but you won't know that until you start changing the globe. But if the tenant changes the globe and it's a transformer, it's the landlord. If it's just the globe, it's the tenant.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it's just little things like that, but it's just kind of making sure that the property is compliant, making sure that the property is habitable, like as in you can live in it. If it's uninhabitable, we as a property manager, it's our duty of care to not take on something like that. So you don't want to be getting an old decrepit home and not have running water or a functional bathroom or no stovetop or cooking utilities.
Right.
Those sort of things. So you don't want to be taking on anything like that. Not that you have any of that, but it's there are some landlords that do take on older properties with the hope of knocking it down one day but not wanting to spend any money. That's where it gets a little bit tricky for us.
Makes sense. Yeah, that empty furniture, that's a good tip for landlords, for sure.
Yeah.
What about if example that home doesn't come with a fly screen and the tenant asks, can you install a fly screen?
Yes.
Do they have to accept?
They don't have to accept it because they've actually seen the property as is.
Okay.
So again, too, it's one of those things, unless the tenants actually put a condition in the actual application process, asking that the property be professionally cleaned or the carpets be steam cleaned or have a fly screen door, that has to be pretty much nominated at the very beginning, and then obviously approved in writing by the owner. So it's more that the tenant takes the property as they see it. So as they apply and it's been approved, that's how they accept it.
Yeah,
I see.
So that probably apply to air conditioning. If they want an extra unit, it's probably by negotiation, isn't it?
Correct. Yes. So it's only to your advantage anyway. A lot of owners, I've got a particular property in Grantham Farm. It's taken a little bit longer than anticipated, but again, it doesn't have air conditioning upstairs, and we're going into summertime. Yeah. So everybody, that's a tick off their box. So it's one of those things. Again, for me to say to the owner, it's only going to add somewhat value to your property. Maybe consider ducted air conditioning or a couple of split systems upstairs.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an expensive process, but it's such a small price to pay, given that the flow of tenant will just be it would just be easier to rent next time, as opposed to it's either a deal breaker or not. So it's a hit and miss for a lot of tenants.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the light bulb example, that's a grey. What other grey areas can you think of?
I'd be very conscious in asking that all owners make sure that the properties are water compliant. So what that means is everything has to be made water efficient. There's a lot of owners, unfortunately, that do run the risk of not making sure that their property is compliant. And it's as simple as actually getting a plumber out there to make sure that it is efficient. And then there's a certificate that we provide to the tenant should they ask for it. So if it is found that the property is not compliant, then the tenant can actually ask for all their water usage back. And we can't deny them of that.
Oh,
so that's interesting. So a lot of owners are not understanding. Again, not a lot of owners, but there are a handful of owners that won't want to make it compliant, and we're looking at maybe $100 for the plumber to go out there and actually assess it and actually do the needful. So if there's major leaks to the property, that's when they actually quote on top of that compliance check. So it's only a small price to pay to make sure that there's always a domino effect. So if it is that they don't do that due diligence, there is that risk we run that the tenant actually then claim their water usage. Yes.
Okay.
But a normal property, do you encourage owner would actually do that, or you assume that if it's a pretty well maintained property, no water leaking or dripping, it should be okay?
No, it's actually there's little fixtures and fittings that actually go into the actual taps and so forth. That actually has to make it compliant.
Okay.
Yes, so they actually do. There is a process of the actual on the plumber's part to make sure that it is compliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go. We learned something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then on the topic of attracting, good tenants.
Yes.
So I think this is a very important topic, for our members who are, landlords, investors. What do you look in to qualify the tenants? Like, what are the specific things that you look for?
Specific things. I actually like stability in employment. That's one key thing. I look for rental history. I actually look at the rental ledger. That's the first thing I do before I ring the property manager, if there's already a rental ledger supplied, because if I've got a tenant, I'm very particular about rental arrears. So if the tenant's a day behind, they'll be hearing from me. So it's one of those things where I look at the ledger, and if there's if it's constant arrears, I don't even look at it any further. So it's one of those things that if they're not going to make do, as much as the property manager might have actually encouraged the tenant to catch up and pay a little bit extra every week to get in front, or even to be paid up to date, if they're not doing that, I'm not interested. So it's one of those things. A flawless rental history would be fabulous. And again, that's where, again, a point of difference for myself. I meet the tenant. They've been approved. I meet them at the property. So they don't come to my office. I go to them. I do a walkthrough with them, and also point out anything that needs attention, such as this is how the alarm works, or this is how the door keypad works. Make sure you clean the filters in the actual air conditioning. So there's a bit of a process on my part, but making sure that the tenant does the right thing. So I go thoroughly through the lease itself, the terms and conditions, what their obligations and responsibilities are. I let them know of what the landlords are, but also let them know of what's an emergency what's an emergency repair, as opposed to them just ringing my tradespeople off the lease and just getting it fixed because they can. There's again another process. So that's all explained. And then I hit them heavy with the actual conversation about rental arrears, that it does affect them down the line. So, in terms of maybe going for a next rental, or maybe going for a car loan or a credit card, a lot of banks and institutions actually look for rental ledgers. So making sure that they are paying rent on time, because that's important.
Yeah. So you kind of bring that up front.
Yes.
Just to manage the expectation, you better pay that, right?
Correct. And I think also that gives them an idea of how I work. So when it doesn't come as a shock or surprise to them when I have that conversation. So as much as I might have a great rapport with them, that conversation's heavy, might be because of personal circumstances, but it's all about communication. So if I've got somebody that comes and presents themselves at a particular open home, I'm actually quite interested in hearing what they have to say. If they're going to tell me exactly what I want to hear, because they're a great tenant, pay rent on time, look after the property, I don't know that yet until I actually see the paperwork. So, and do my due diligence. So I actually like the ones that are, again, I think earlier I said, that come to me, generally interested in the property, tell me a little bit about themselves. You get a good feeling about people, and I'm usually almost 99.9% right. So, again, no problem rent roll, and it all starts from the very beginning is finding the right tenant.
Yes, absolutely.
I think what Amanda does is pretty important. You set the expectations up front.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
You're being fair and reasonable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that and you're not just being nice.
Yes.
I think that's super critical.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that is, I guess, if I may say, the same due diligence criteria, search criteria for me, because I'm responsible for looking for property managers for our members. So if everything go wrong, they blame me. So I actually applied the same, because recently we brought in a property couple in the Melbourne space. Because we had recommended a number of opportunities in Melbourne.
Yes.
And I applied the same.
Yes.
And I think they share very much the same philosophy to what you just explained to us as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think, again, you've got a lot of property managers that will sit behind a desk, be behind the computer all day, and you have a lot of the actual juniors running around. So for me, say, for instance, if Beck goes to have a look, it goes to show some people through, I ask a million questions because I still feel I need to be in control and get to know. But Beck knows who. She's seen the rent roll. She's seen the quality of tenants that I've got in all my properties. Beck's been doing a lot of the routines for me, so takes lots of photos, sends reports to the owners, and that sort of thing. So she understands my level of expectation when it comes to people and who go in my property. Because again, it's a problem for me. I don't want to be dealing with the wrath of picking the wrong tenant because I had a bad gut feeling or it just wasn't sitting right with me. And I probably most of my decisions I base on my gut just by actually meeting with people. I can read who's good and who's bad from the minute I meet them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really coming down to your, practical experience for the last 15 years, right?
Yes.
Or more than that.
Yes, correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Yes.
Professional judgment.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's very valuable.
Yeah, not really gut, but it comes with your
It
experience.
is, yeah, that's right. It's experience, but also too just dealing with people day in and day out. It's a personality thing for me, and it's got to work.
Yeah.
So I've got to have a good rapport, and the tenant. To be honest, there's a lot of tenants that will try and challenge a lot of property managers because they might have very well rights and responsibilities, and if the property manager is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, fair enough. But I think when you have a difficult tenant, it can create a little bit of disruption, I guess. But it's one of those things. It's always key to find good people, that are going to be easy to deal with. And that are fair and reasonable themselves.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if I'm right, but when you get multiple rental applications, for one property, and can you make recommendations to the landlord?
90%
if they look
of the time,
equally pretty good.
Yes.
How do you filter through that?
Filter through it just by the conversation that I've had with the tenants at the property. You might get a really good application, but we had no interaction because they were such a closed book. That's not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. And they might end up being the star of the applications. But I feel like it's a combination of everything, and so my owners generally go off my recommendation because I've met with them. And I've dealt with the client, got to know them, asked a lot of questions. So I don't just go, and I do a rundown. So there's a whole due diligence done, and then I give the owners a rundown. So of how long they've been in their place of employment, what they earn, how many children, how old the children are, how old the dog is. And this is interesting because if I say yes to a dog because the owner's okay with the dog and the dog's 14 years old, but unfortunately something happens to that dog, and then they get a puppy, different story. We didn't approve the puppy. We approved a 14-year-old dog.
Yeah.
So whilst there's all these little things, so that's why I ask ages of
You're very
pets.
thorough. I didn't think about that myself.
It's things like that. Puppies are very different because they destroy stuff. They chew on architraves. It's scratch doors. It's a thing that it happens. So I think there's a lot of things that I can find out prior to the application process, and then the applications just speak for itself.
Yeah.
And so with the rundown, I usually give my top 2 ideas of who would be great, because also too, it's got to fit for the owner and it's got to fit for the property.
Yes.
It's really important.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is more of a legislation question.
Yes.
Has there been any recent changes in the rental legislation in New South Wales that our
Since
members
2020?
should be aware aware of?
Back in March, I think 23rd of March 2020, there was legislation changes.
Right.
A couple of key ones that a lot of owners don't know is that if they decide to renew the lease with a tenant, but they have an idea that they may want to sell the property, a lot of investors are not aware that should they sell it and there's a contract in place, the owners are breaking that contract. So the tenant can actually now move out without penalty.
Oh, okay.
Very interesting. So in this market, because there are obviously inflation in increases in
Rents?
Rents, but also in rate rises.
Interest rates.
Interest rates. So a lot of owners have got the idea that they're going to sell, but they weren't aware because that's something that's new or newish with regards to tenants actually breaking, not necessarily breaking a lease. They can just move out without penalty. Just give 2 weeks notice and move.
Right.
Yes.
So if they sold the property while there's a lease on it, so the tenant could literally say, I'm going within 2 weeks.
Yes, well, even this is more interesting. So it doesn't stop there. If the actual tenant, because that owner's broken the actual contract, and that's how they say it, they call it a breach. So if the owner's actually breached the contract, that new owner takes on that breach of contract. So the tenant can actually still move out, even though the property's sold and it's a new owner, and we've introduced the tenant to the new owner via email or whatever it may be, that tenant can still move out.
Right. Okay.
How long can they use that excuse or
the whole term of the contract?
The
anytime,
lease.
as long as it's still active.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct. Yeah. So if it is that, and it depends on what lease, because there's a lot of agents that don't renew leases. So this could be a lease that was back in 1999. Different rules apply because they can only go off those terms and conditions.
Okay. Yeah.
So if it is something more recent where a tenant last week had signed with me, then obviously they have to adhere to those terms and conditions. And it's actually mentioned in that's not mentioned in the lease as such, but another one that I do want to discuss is breaking the lease. So if the tenant decides to break the lease, anything from 0 to 25%, if they break that lease within that contract period, they have to pay a week. If it's 25 to 50%, it's 2 weeks.
You mean the remaining lease term?
Well, no, it's only that if they're actually in a contract and they decide to leave because they've got work in Melbourne, they only have to give minimum 1 week or maximum 4, depending on the actual how much is left in the lease.
Okay.
So they might have only just signed and decided it's not for them and they're moving on. And anything from almost 100% of the lease to 75%, they have to pay a 4-week break lease.
Okay.
So they're not necessarily penalised for the whole duration of the lease.
Yes.
Whereas before now, there's been occasions where I've experienced, obviously being in it for a while, where tenants have to pay rent up until the time that we find a new tenant.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well.
Yes.
Is that an option?
There's no option.
No option anymore?
No, it's actually written into the lease agreement. So it's all part of the way it is. Yeah.
Because that happened to me in one of my Queensland properties where the tenant just has to pay rent up until a new tenant is found.
Different states.
Yeah.
Everything's sort of same, but different rules can apply.
I see.
So they might be a little bit more. Yeah, so I know that when I lived in Queensland for about 5 years, and again did property management, worked for a property management specialist group, so I learnt a lot from that being up there. And they have all Form 6 and Form 9s and all different things. So they have a lot of different ways of doing things, and I think it's just as good, but there are slight differences for each state.
Okay, so break lease. Yeah,
break lease.
That's a new. Anything else?
So
you mentioned 2.
That's very interesting to know. Thank you.
That's good. Yeah, I did actually. I wanted to let you know about that because a lot of the actual, when I do have an owner that's thinking about selling, I'm telling them up front because their sale agent may not tell them that.
Sure.
They just want the sale, you see. So I've got to let them know that there is that risk that they run, that the tenant may move out and not be penalised for it. So, and I'm not saying a lot of salespeople, a handful of salespeople don't know that either.
Sure.
Yeah. Makes sense.
That's right.
What else is there? Beck?
So maybe I make it more specific. I know during COVID time, I'm not sure whether New South Wales have, but certainly like in Victorian government and even Queensland government, they introduced a series of legislation changes that are, well, being a landlord, we believe is more favourable to the tenants.
Yes.
I'm not sure that any of those changes are still relevant or still stay for New South Wales. Yeah, that we need to be aware of. Yeah.
Yeah. Not at the moment, no, because COVID is almost,
done and dusted.
Considered done and dusted. That was going to be my term. So
Yeah.
I think when we experienced COVID, a lot of property managers or a network of property managers that I know actually did experience where tenants actually couldn't pay their rent, wanted to reduce the rents. But there was a process that the government had put in place, or the REI Institute, the Real Estate Institute, put in place with regards to making sure that it has to be a legitimate reason why they're actually requesting for a decrease. So there was a bit of a process in terms of applications and requesting. And obviously, too, it was known to tenants that whilst we give you this decrease for now, there is an arrears. It's going to be. It's not going to be showing or reflecting as such, but you will have to pay back that debt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't going to be a free ride. Which I think was great. But again, during COVID, again, I think the areas that I service and the fact that everybody was in stable employment, I didn't have a single tenant that was affected.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
And just the last one is we'd love to hear the current state of the rental market, especially the areas that you look after mainly.
Yes.
What are the most recent trends? Because a lot of things have changed in the past 6 months.
Yes.
Recent interest rate increases.
Yes.
And high inflation.
Yes.
Has that affected the rental market too much?
I think it's rent increases. So you've got a lot of tenants that have actually been in property for quite some time. Obviously, due to rate increases and so forth, a lot of owners have obviously they've got options depending on how their loans work.
Yep.
And we're not privy to that. So if there is an owner that says to me, what's my home worth now? We give them an RP data report and actually let them know of what they're comparing their property to other properties in the marketplace. So with that said, I'd have to say probably 80% of my rent roll has had an increase of some sort. Letting you know as well, and I'm going off topic here for a minute, but again with rent increases, letting you know as well that even if the tenant is you can't increase the rent more than once a year now. So that's new.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yes. So you can only do every 12 months is a rent increase.
What about I got a 6-month lease?
Correct.
Still only
12
once
months.
Okay,
Yes,
interesting.
yes.
Okay.
So with that said, if I'm implementing a rent increase, we have to make sure that one wasn't just put in 6 months ago. So we have to make sure that it has to be every 12 months now. So again, Marsden Park, great for you, Priscilla, because rents there have just gone crazy. I've never seen a market.
Woohoo!
Yeah. So I hope you actually get maximising your investment. So with that said, the rents, it's on the flip side because I feel for tenants, but I've got a job to do as well. And it's all relevant to the times and how things are going. So I think I've got to put all that aside and just do my job and obviously make sure that the actual owner is actually maximising most of their investment. We also I have that conversation with the tenant. I pick up the phone and let them know before I just send them a rent increase letter because there's nothing more impersonal than letting them know that you're going to be paying $60 extra a week. So I've had a tenant that unfortunately has had to pay $100. Well, I say that unfortunate just for the tenant, but that's all relevant because of what's happened. So with that said, a lot of my tenants are understanding because I do actually say to them, please look into the marketplace and compare your property to others. And just so you know, I'm not just doing it for the sake of it. There is reason to this. So they do. And I really haven't had a tenant. I probably had 2 move out because of a rental increase. And that's because they didn't really want to be paying what they paid in the first place.
Yeah.
So they found something around the actual same price.
Yeah.
But again, what they were paying, let's say hypothetical, something that was $580 for a 4-bedroom in Grantham Farm is now worth about $680. So very different market.
What do you see while we're on this rent increase topic?
Yes.
What would you see moving forward? Do you think there's still continue a tightening of rental property on offer? So the rent will continue to be increasing?
I'm somewhat seeing a little bit of a shift with my properties. So I'm starting to see that it's sort of found its place, if that makes sense. So it's starting to feel like it's there. So we've done increases and we've now met the market. So that's where I feel rent increases will probably come around again in about another 12 months.
Okay.
So luckily for me, and luckily for a lot of the owners, my investors, I haven't had too many that have had to sell because of rate rises and things. So which is a good thing, for everybody, for landlord, tenant as well, because the more that owners sell, you know, the harder for the tenant. You know, trying to find something that, you know, is of what they've got.
Yeah. That's I think this is our observation as well on the general market, that actually not many people are being have to do a fire sale.
Yes.
Because the consecutive interest rate rises in the recent time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But the area that we're generally recommending to our members are very much owner-occupied heavy area.
Yes.
So as a result, that may have make a difference as well.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
That's great. Yes.
Amazing. Well, I think that wraps it up.
Lovely.
Thank you so much,
great.
Amanda.
Wonderful. We learned a lot throughout that 30 minutes conversation.
Thank you.
We should chat more often.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity, and again, for even just, you know, your investors and so forth. So I do pride myself on actually servicing them in terms of giving them good service. So I want to continue that, and hopefully, see where it goes.
And we very confident in saying to our member who happen to have watched this episode that you guys are in very good hands if you happen to be, you know, working with Amanda.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank
you again, Amanda.
Thank
All right,
you
take
very
care.
much. Thank you.
Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you, members.
Thank you.